Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for being here, and welcome to JDC West 2016 International Business Case Presentation. First off, I'd like to just give a huge thanks to our judges. We have Gary Vickers from EMCO, Josh Lawson from Scotiabank, Michael Kozar from Federated Cooperatives Limited, Kenneth Coates from Johnson Shoyama, Graduate School of Public Policy, Wayne Brownlee from Potash Corp, and Carolyn Tassad from P&G. So competitors will have a maximum of 20 minutes to present. Immediately following the presentation, judges will have a total of 5 minutes to ask the presenters questions. The volunteer timekeeper will show time cards at various intervals to indicate the remaining time and will stop any speaker who exceeds the maximum time limit. No questions, comments, cell phones, or picture taking will be permitted from the audience at any time. The audience will only be permitted to applaud following the question and answer period. The audience is banned from any material that bears the name or symbol of a competing university, and we ask that the audience exit the room immediately following the question and answer period. So competitors, you may begin when you are ready.
All right, so first and foremost, I'd like to say thank you for Granite Board for being here today. My name is Jason, this is Blair and Romeo, and we're really excited to be here working with you on this really, really exciting opportunity. Now, with all great expansion opportunities, there's always that risk that you overexpand and this opportunity doesn't work out. But there's also the opportunity. There's also the possibility that you kind of lose something about yourself on that journey and on that quest. And there's a Chinese proverb that goes, "It is better to return and make a net than to simply stand at the river and wish for fish." And this is what we believe that you should keep in mind as you're exploring these opportunities here. You must ensure that you have that net, you have that structural integrity so that you can continue to grow, continue to catch fish into the future. And with what we have here, our recommendation, we believe that we give you that. And we want to give you that net so that you can continue to grow and catch as much fish as your heart desires. So, I'm going to first start with some results. What you're going to do is, what our recommendation is going to give you today is you're going to partner with the most ethically, economically, and politically stable option of the three we were given here. And the second thing is, this is a big one here. Granite Aviation is going to be the industry pioneer here. You're going to do something that has not been done in the airline industry, and it's going to be on the cutting edge of technology. And finally, this is going to create a key competitive advantage. And this is going to help you grow into the future with essentially no limitations. So let's make it happen. What we're going to do is we're going to accept that flight contract offer. They don't want to deal with the servicing and installing. We'll take that on. Because what they're missing out on this is with the servicing comes valuable data. And with that data, you can do a lot of things with it. So what we're going to do is enter just Oman. We've looked over all the pros and cons, and we've found that Oman is the most suitable because of those political, economic, and ethical factors. Now what we're going to do here is that with that data, we're going to create a data analytics team. This is the name of the game, the future of business, is getting that data, doing the analysis, using machine learning, using all the cutting edge technology to improve safety, to reduce inefficiencies, and in general, just create more prosperity in the industry here. So here's a quick agenda, analysis, recommendations, and into our conclusion and implementation there. So here we have an issue identification. Now the primary one, of course, is this a good opportunity for us? Is Oman, is Angola, is Burundi a good place for you guys to enter? So after we determine that, the question is, how are we going to do that? What kind of strategic direction are we going to have as we move into the future? Now with that in mind, I'm just going to pass on to Romeo, who's going to go over our analysis.
Thank you, Jason. So we're going to start here by looking at the industry as a whole, looking at the external trends that affect your industry in particular. So the biggest one is the cost pressures. We all know that operating an airline is extremely costly, especially in this day and age. Airlines have extremely razor-thin margins, on average a little bit less than 3%. So anything that can save the airlines time, money, and that can increase their efficient use of resources is key to their continued success into the future. There is also political volatility all around the world. Now, just looking at the three options that were given here, Angola, Burundi, and Oman. Angola is a country that has suffered from issues of corruption throughout its history. Burundi is currently experiencing quite a bit of civil unrest, and the Canadian government actually has told Canadians to avoid to go to that particular country. And then finally, Oman is under a monarchy. However, the monarch is 73 years old, and there is no succession planning. So we really don't know what will happen necessarily in those three countries in the future. And then that leads into economic policies. With political volatility, the different governments have different economic challenges that they need to address, and they do so in different ways. So figuring out the best way to deal with those countries and with those governments is something that you must keep into account. However, there are plenty of opportunities. There's a growth in airline industry revenue. It has doubled in the last decade, just about $750 billion per year. There's also high GDP growth in all three of these countries that I mentioned. And then finally, there's a big growth in what are called the low-cost carriers. These are the no-frills carriers that basically take you from A to B and don't really offer you anything extra, but pass on the savings directly to the customers. So let's look at your company internally and see how we can use your internal resources to move into the future. So some of the challenges that you face, you do have a small team of about 15 people. And with that small team, that comes a limited reach. You can't be everywhere at once if you're going to compete in the global market. However, with this small team, it allows you the opportunity to be nimble, to be flexible, to be able to provide good one-on-one customer service with your clients, and use that to your advantage in order to gain new potential clients. Your small team is very experienced professional teams. You are senior leaders in the industry. Your competitors generally assign junior level staff to do the jobs that your very experienced employees do. So you have a great advantage in that. And then finally, you are selling to your clients some cutting edge technology compared with competitors. And what we mean by that is partnering up with Flight to use their latest flight data recorders that provide real-time information so that airlines can reduce inefficiencies, can save time, can save money, and also can improve their safety record. We know that the economic impact of a single plane crash is nearing $350 million. This is a nightmare scenario for airlines. And your company will help airlines avoid these economic risks, and they will help airlines prosper into the future. So with that in mind, we've come up with three decision criteria in coming up to our recommendation. The first one is we want to follow the external trends in the industry. And by external trends, I mean the growth in those low-cost carriers, and also the growth in the three country options that we mentioned to you earlier in this presentation. Finally, you want to leverage those internal resources that you have. So that small, experienced team that you have that is quick, that is nimble, that provides industry-leading customer service to your clients. And then finally, we want to be able to find a new growth driver. And that is where that data analytics comes into play, and we will get into that more as we progress. So our first alternative is to enter all three of the select new markets, Angola, Burundi, and the Kingdom of Oman. The pros for that is it will give you some new revenue streams. It will also increase your growth potential into the future. These countries don't stand alone by themselves. They have neighbors, they have partners. By going into these countries, you expand your opportunity to gain new partners into the future. Cons, as I mentioned earlier, there's quite a bit of political risk. There's also the accounts receivable risk here. You have no idea whether you will be paid at all or paid on time. So that is something that you must keep in mind. And then also growth management issues. As I mentioned earlier, you're a small team. Will you be able to handle expanding into those 3 countries all at once? Our second alternative is to halt the entry into those 3 new markets. So the pros for that is we would be avoiding some of the legal troubles associated with moving into those markets, as well as the ethical implications of moving into those markets. We would also avoid that accounts receivable risk. Cons, however, we have a potential loss of lucrative contracts, and as well as sunk costs. You have spent $200,000 already just preparing to be able to be in a position to enter into these new countries. Finally, our third alternative is to develop that data analytics team. So what that will give you long-term growth opportunities into the future. This is where the world of airlines is going into. They need to be able to save as much time, whether it's seconds or even milliseconds per flight, because that has huge ramifications over the years, over the decades, possibly even centuries to go. Also, by doing this, you will become an industry pioneer. No one else in your industry is currently using the data taken from the flight data recorders in real time. This is something that you will be able to provide to your airline partners. And then finally, this will give you that distinct competitive advantage over your competitors. Cons, however, by taking this approach, you potentially reduce on the short-term revenue streams and short-term gains. And there's also some upfront costs that will come in, the cost of hiring the data analytics team, developing the data management system, and so on and so forth. So now I'll pass it on to Blair, and we'll go deeper into our decision matrix.
Thank you. So you've got an incredibly large decision to make, and we went through some of the keys to success. And what is really important when analyzing this decision? Well, one of the largest things is when you're entering the new markets, it will follow the external trends. You know that these markets are growing, and if you can get these contracts, you're taking advantage of those markets. It will fail to leverage your internal resources because you only have 15 people and you're trying to expand into 3 very large markets, and you may be growing too fast. And lastly, will it set you up for future growth? Yeah, it may set you up for growth because we know that these markets are growing. The next is halt entry into the new markets. Well, it's not following the external trends. As I said, they're growing markets, so you want to be a part of them. The next is leveraging your internal resources. Well, you have a small team, so you can continue to do what you do very well. You're small and flexible and nimble, and you will fail to be set up for future growth potential in these markets because they are growing. And lastly, developing a data analytics team will follow the external trends because you will be able to enter these new markets. You'll be able to use new data to actually be more precise in these markets and use it as leverage in the future, gaining new contracts. And then it will leverage your internal resources because you can continue doing what you do best, and you can have a new data analytics team to help you out analyzing the data, and then set up for growth in the future, which I said it will be easier to gain contracts in the future, and it will maximize the resources you have. So what the recommendation is accepting the flight contract offer. So this is servicing. You will now have to service, install, and educate the new clients that you will receive in your contract. So what's important here when you're signing the new contract is that you will have access to the data as well as them. And this will be very important in the future that I'll discuss. The next is entering just Omen. This way you are able to use your flexible team, and you only have 15 people. So entering an Omen is still a very large market, but the other 2 are just not only too risky, but it's growing too fast. And the last is creating a Granite Aviation data analytics team. So Romeo's just going to discuss a little more why it is just Omen that you will enter.
So as I mentioned earlier in the presentation, Oman is currently a monarchy. And it is a stable monarchy, even though the current king is 73 years old. He does have plenty of relatives under him. There is no current succession plan, but we can assume that in the future, the entire political system of Oman is not going to flip upside down and change completely. Oman's government is also quoted as saying that it will push ahead with its economic diversification program. Oman is a country that's very reliant on its oil industry, and has realized that in these times of economic uncertainty, especially in the oil industry, it's extremely important for that country to diversify its industries. It is doing so mostly by looking into tourism and service-related goods and services. It also currently has a very strong domestic demand. The non-oil growth sector is growing currently at 3.9%. And one of the ethical concerns with Oman was the fact that you would have to pay an upfront fee to the airline that would be used for some improvements in the airport. Now, Oman has guaranteed that they will provide the necessary documentation to show that these fees will be used for the airport construction projects, and they will not be put directly into the pockets of the managing director of the airport construction company. So Blair will go a little bit more into detail about the data analytics team.
So we've discussed quite a bit about that there's going to be competitive advantage, but we haven't discussed exactly why. The reason is when you're getting aggregate data from all the airlines, what you have is a more robust and larger data set than everyone else in the market. What this means is that when you're making inferences about the population or the airline industry as a whole, you are not only more accurate than your competitors, but you're also more precise, so you can deliver more useful, valuable information to your clients. So why this will be important, that you can use the data to improve safety and reduce inefficiencies, and like I said, it will be more accurate and it will be more precise. The next is that you'll have the first mover advantage. You'll be the first one in the industry to do this, and it will be a major competitive advantage. And the next is the distinct advantage for negotiating new contracts. When you're signing new contracts and selling out the flight model, you will be able to use this as leverage for gaining contracts and signing more advantageous terms for yourself. And exactly how can you make this happen? In the next hour, you have to decide whether you're going to bid on Oman. And what you need to do is bid on Oman and agree to flights changes to the contract, and that they will be exclusive to you, and you'll be able to use them in the future. And in the next year, you're going to hire 5 data analysts. What this is going to be is it's going to be 3 statisticians, probably with PhDs and large amounts of industry experience. This will cost roughly $125,000 per person per year, and 2 computer scientists, which will cost roughly $70,000 per year. So what it's going to take to implement our plan is $540,000. So the next, what the data management team is going to do, first they're going to have to set up a data management system so you can use that data very easily and inform your current clients of new product offering and why you're different than you were before. Then moving on into the next 1 to 5 years, you're going to contact new potential clients, especially in the up-and-coming industries, and once again, use your new strategic direction and advantage in signing these new contracts and analyzing and managing the data that has been gathered into the future. 5 years and beyond, what you should be considering is continually optimizing your data analytics and measuring the performance of that data analytics team, and then evaluate the purchase or a merger with Flight. Why this is important is because they may be in some financial distress right now, which I'm going to get into in our risk and mitigation. This is because we've actually seen that they've taken on some new debt in the form of convertible debentures, and they also suffered some net losses last year. But we believe with the new contracts, this may ameliorate in the future, but it will be more profitable for you to potentially merge with them in the future. The next is the reluctance in forfeiting the data. So what if the new airlines don't want to forfeit their data to you moving into the future? Well, what you're going to do is reinforce the economic impact of a crash and also the inefficiencies and why your data in the future will not only be more accurate, but also more precise, which is a win-win for both parties. And what that ultimately means is lower costs. Jason's going to jump in for our results and conclusion.
All right, so looking at the industry right now, airlines do have data. That is a fact. However, they're using their own data to improve their own efficiencies. The difference here is that we're going to have data from across all airlines, and with that data, we have predictions and models, and we know the trends that are going to be better than anyone else on the market here. Now, if you want to look something like the car industry, Google and Tesla are fighting for data. That's what they're doing, is they're fighting for data, and they are industry leaders. And with this data, they improve safety, they improve efficiency, and they're set up for huge growth. Now, what our recommendation is going to do is turn you into the Tesla or the Google of the air. Now, with that, I'd like to say thank you very much for being here and open up for questions.
Great, thank you.
So I think you've done a good job of identifying the struggles that flights have in the last couple of years in terms of some increased deficits and losses. Does it concern you at all that we're springing this data on you at the 12th hour in this exercise?
Yeah. So we see that they are, and we understand why they would be doing that. However, I don't think they understand just how valuable that data is. And if we can continually expand this model to other airlines, to our current clients, the growth potential is endless. And I think it is a risk that we should be willing to take.
Assuming you're correct, and airlines don't mind sharing data with us, which is theirs, that's an advantage for us, nothing for Flight. But Flight has asked us to bid on three RFPs with them, and we're going to go back and suggest one. Could you see a problem Flight might have with us building a nice business model on data, and they're only getting maybe our help bidding on one RFP?
Right, but what we have to consider is the long-run potential, because their incentives are in line with ours. If you can do this properly into the future, you will have a larger market share, and which means you will have larger sales. And when you have larger sales and they're in an exclusive contract with you, that means they will be more profitable as well.
Is the data actually ours, or is it not Flight's because they own the software?
Sorry, could you repeat that?
So Flight owns the software, and they've developed the software, so would the data not be theirs?
Right, so with the servicing, we assume that we would also be taking on, we'd be taking on the data also.
And would they be willing to give that up? Is your assumption?
Yeah, well, we think, again, like, we are aligned with them. If we can sell more Flight units, they profit, and we believe that that negotiation can happen.
The data analytics is an interesting angle that you bring to it. Did you think about any other risks or considerations as you bring that to life, given that it's newer for the industry, it would be a new capability for your business, for Flight? What are the other things that you considered that would have to be top of mind?
Well, I think one of them, of course, in this new digital age, is security and anonymity. And what we're going to do is we're going to ensure that the data that we take in will not be sold to different airlines. Well, it can be sold, but it will be sold anonymously. We won't say that this airline does this, thus you should follow in footsteps. We'd say, here's all this data, and it's suggesting this. And I think that's how we mitigate that risk.
So you're a very bold plan here. So why are you so cautious on the other two countries? You didn't really talk too much about the opportunities to get rid of the risk that's there, or to at least offset the risk that's there.
Well, to start off with Burundi, as I mentioned, the country right now has a lot of political unrest. The country is also pretty much a quasi-dictatorship at this time. We really don't know what will happen with this current unrest there. Airline travel is even, as I mentioned, discouraged to Burundi. So we just don't see the opportunity there. And then when it comes to Angola, we just don't think that the ethical implications of going there and having to pay the person who basically introduced us to the opportunity in Angola a fee. We just don't feel like that aligns with our ethical values here and with your ethical values as Granite. That is the reason why we decided to go with Oman. Oman is more politically stable, more economically stable as well, and it can be used as to jumpstart our project here into potential new markets in the future.
So, I'm a finance guy. Sounds good, what's my ROI?
Right, and unfortunately, something like this can be unquantifiable because we don't know when you're negotiating those new contracts. I can't tell you that you will negotiate X amount of new contracts, but what we can tell you is that you will be gaining new clients, and we can tell you that you will be able to leverage more profitable deals in the future, and it will initiate and exponentiate the growth in your company.
So just to add on to that, we see huge tech companies taking losses, actually, just to gain this data. So in this way, that tells you just how valuable this data is. And with that data, and if you can improve safety, which is, as Romeo has mentioned, how important it is to avoid, we absolutely think that it will be profitable into the future.
All right, and that's all the time we have for questions, so thank you very much.